Sometimes my breath is taken away by this sanctuary, the way that light and sound fills the room, the warmth of all those who gather here. This is a sanctuary where I was first called and installed. On this chancel, I have witnessed with you the cycle of life, from child dedications to weddings and unions to memorial service pronouncements. This sanctuary holds the choir loft where I have sung with and cried with the adult choir. And it holds the pew where I felt our daughter kick for the first time. Those windows look out onto the memorial garden where I have returned the ashes of many of whom I love to the good earth. It is also in that garden where you threw a wonderful celebration for my new family, the blessing of our child. The garden is where I often pause during the day, take off my shoes, walk through the grass, to reconnect to God, so that in the midst of meetings and tasks and agendas and calendars, and even in the midst of conflict, I can remember that my ministry and my leadership should be grounded in my values and my intention to be a good steward of those whose hopes and dreams I carry with me. When colleagues visit, I love to show them around this church. Our building and what it demonstrates of our programming and our outreach is today so much more than what many Unitarian churches even believe that they are capable of. Do you know that? What we are right now is what many of our churches dream to one day become. Once a colleague who was awed by the artist's atelier and the majestic theater and the sponge room and the banks of the Nile said to me, "Oh my God, you work in UU Disneyland." Now, if he meant the place where the dreams of our free faith come true, then he's right. In our chapel, I have experienced magical moments where I watched the seasons change through the window. And I've seen Rick Fortner convince the autumn leaves to visually accompany him on piano. In that chapel, I have had the hands of the staff laid upon me as my family struggled with the news of Beckett's heart condition. Outside the door of our chapel hangs a ministerial robe of Jenkins Lloyd-Jones. That encased robe reminds me every time I see it that I am part of a legacy of clergy and lay alike who built this church and expect me to help take care of it. Now, in our pews today, you will still find the Jones family, supporting the expanding ministry and the mission of this church beyond even what our forefathers and mothers dreamed. The history of this church is palpable. It envelops you when you step through the door. I've heard so many people try to describe it. They say it feels magical or poignant or significant. They've told me that it calls them to rise up to be their best, or at least their better selves. It encourages them to dream of justice and compassion and courage and connection in ways they never thought possible. Now, like me, maybe you don't know many of the stories behind those who dreamed generations ago to make us who we are today. But I learned a few of those stories in my 5 years here that helped me better understand the context in which we find ourselves today. And I'd like to share one with you this morning that I hope will not only offer you some context, but also touch your heart. During the 1920s, this church met in Tulsa's Majestic Theater, and the first paid staff person other than the minister was a soloist named Fred Welsh. Fred and his wife, Clara, were an integral part of this church. Clara organized and kept the church school running, single-handedly, I bet, served as the bookkeeper, the primary fundraiser, and successfully raised the money to buy the church school its first piano. When in the middle of building the church on Boulder, the money to complete the project ran out, Clara wrote an impassioned letter to the American Unitarian Association requesting funds, and they received a loan. Eventually, that loan was paid off at $75 per year with funds raised by the Sunday school and that last check written by Clara. The building on Boulder was being built during the Great Depression, so little work was to be found, and people were challenged to pay the expenses of their own family, so giving to the church was difficult. But the church pulled together. With the economy in such bad shape, the Welshes were struggling, and they needed a place to live. Well, the Jones family had just moved before this crisis hit and had not yet been able to sell their other home. And so the Joneses offered the Welshes a home to live in exchange for Fred Welsh singing for the church without pay. So the Welshes had a roof over their head, and the church had music in one of the most difficult times in this country's history. The church came through for the Welsh family when they had very little, and the Welsh family came through for the church. And that formed a deep connection and a well of gratitude from which service and generosity to this church has flowed ever since, from all generations of these two families. Panny Welsh grew up attending the church on Boulder and made the move to this building on Peoria. She witnessed the addition of the religious education wing and the later addition of the choir loft. Panny later married Art McElroy, and together they started a machine shop in their garage with their own two hands. It was in that garage that Art first invented a machine that eventually turned into McElroy Manufacturing, which today is the world's leader in its field. Through good times or bad, that family never wavered in their support of this church. Art and Panny's children grew up attending in this church building, as do their children. It is they, the grandchildren of Fred and Clara Welsh, a family that has been an integral part of this community since the 1920s, who we know better as Donna Dutton, Chip McElroy, and Peggy Tanner, who have offered us the gift of 2 city blocks so that we can have the opportunity to dream bigger, so that we can build a church to serve their children's children yet to be born in our community into its next century. One of the Welshes and one of the Joneses also played an integral part in bringing me to All Souls, Donna Dutton and Georgia Snoke. In May 2008, I was called by this church, by your vote, to serve and to lead alongside Marlon. That fall was an amazing time in the life of this church as we welcomed the former members of Higher Dimensions. My installation, which included the New Dimensions Chorale and the entire adult music program, was nothing less than magical. I had never seen a multiracial, multicultural, Unitarian, Universalist installation, and it was mine. It was more than I ever dreamed possible. For my ministry, for this church, for our faith, for Tulsa, and for this world who desperately needs our saving message of a love that extends beyond belief. So the day of my installation, I want you to know that my call was renewed that day, and a call was placed on my life for my ministry, and I cannot go back. I saw a glimpse that day of a church that I believe could be. It is a church as I believe it should be. Not just in theory, but as a real possibility. And you know, this church, you saw it too. I know you did. Because when you tackled the work of articulating a vision for who you want us to become in 2021, it reflected exactly what I saw and what I felt that day and what I know is possible for us. A church that is an embodiment and celebration of the world as we hope it will one day become. A church bursting with people from a diversity of theologies and philosophies and ethnicities, cultures, colors, classes and abilities, generations, sexual orientations and political persuasions, all dwelling together in peace, seeking the truth in love and helping one another. No matter what happens on November 20th, no matter how you vote, there is one important point of which I would like to remind you. We are all on the same team. We are all on the same team. We are united in our diversity by a common value. We all want a healthy and a thriving All Souls Church in Tulsa. The question is not whether, but how. How do we get there? Which choice is the best one to further our vision? No matter whether you vote to accept this gift and begin the steps that would move this congregation downtown or not, I want you to know that I'm called to be with you, and I will be. I love this church, the grounds and the building, and I love you. This church is my home. But it is not simply this building. You have taught me to dream bigger than I ever thought possible. For myself and my ministry, for this church. And I will not allow my own grief of losing my church home to limit that dream in any way. I will not allow my fear of the work that is ahead of us, and boy, there will be work. No matter what you decide, actually, there will be work. Remember that. Because I believe this is not a vote about whether or not we will move forward or stand still. This is a vote about where we're going to do the work. But no matter what you decide, don't let that work stand in the way of realizing your goal, of keeping your eyes on the prize. You see, you have taught me to be courageous, and so I will feel that fear and do it anyway. So neither my fear nor my grief will keep me from continuing to dream of a church that cries out to be built for Beckett's children's children. A dream that is grounded in my call to serve you, a dream that contains the echoes of the voices of those whose legacy we have inherited. And that dream for me is of a downtown church. Dream with me for a moment. Maybe you can see it. If I close my eyes, I can feel what it will feel like to be in it. It is a thriving community church with a significant presence in downtown Tulsa. And by significant, I mean it has a significant physical presence on culturally neutral ground. With incredible visibility, as everyone who comes into downtown off the highway will pass our church and our sign, and in plain view of City Hall. Plain view. So many people among Finding All Souls tell me, oh, I just wish that I'd known that this church existed years ago. I wish I knew that you were here. People will know where we are and how to find us. I imagine a thriving community church with a significant theological presence in downtown, a religious alternative to the exclusiveness that plagues our city. And a significant presence in our outreach, where our membership and our leadership would be more visible in their work to build the beloved community, or if you don't like that, the kingdom of heaven here on earth. You see, I see us becoming an anchor to a bustling downtown Tulsa. We would be facing Greenwood Avenue, historic Black Wall Street, the site of the worst race massacre in U.S. history. And as we strive to build a community that brings people together of all races, that celebrates diversity, in a city that has been divided by that event for so long, it is redemptive. It is redemptive. I see plenty of parking. Imagine with me. I see plenty of parking for volunteer and worshiper, visitor and member alike. And the parking that we are being offered, I'm not sure if you know, is the block that originally contained a famous building that was used during the riot to interre African Americans as their homes were looted and burned to the ground. May it help to bring people of all kinds to us to heal that wound. We would be using that land to help bring people together. By the 100th anniversary of the riot and of our church in 2021, we might have helped move Tulsa and All Souls toward a very different story about what is possible. What if the way you dream in here and the way that you have affected my dreaming leaks out into Tulsa and makes them dream differently too? I imagine the iconic view of the downtown Tulsa skyline shifting to include our church in the foreground of that perspective. I'm ready for the t-shirt. I can hear a lunchtime bell calling us from the tower, calling residents and workers of all faiths to an inclusive chapel or to contemplative interfaith meditation space. I can see a clear and welcoming point of entry. One point of entry. A hospitable ease of flow that leads into a naturally lit sanctuary with enough room for all those who choose to come. I see a dedicated space for alternative worship like high-def praise and soulful sundown with dedicated lighting and screens and sound equipment. Sorry, I'm dreaming. Let me go off for a while. Outside, I can imagine sidewalk tables in front of the building where anyone can gather for conversation or play a game of chess or take in the surroundings. If the park goes in, you see, we would be across the street from the largest green space in the entire city. And I can already see this park filled with people of all ages, and there are picnickers and impromptu drum circles and dogs and kites and bicycles. All Souls becomes a place where Tulsans want to go, where if they're nearby, they want to stop in, because something interesting is always going on there. A weekly movie that's discussing the theme in our theater room, an outdoor art display luring people into our dedicated art gallery featuring local artists or the art of our children. I have a vision of All Souls expanding beyond the neighborhood church. Can you see it? And becoming a facet of downtown, a point of interest. I see us becoming the anchor of a public space. I could go on, but Marlon still has to talk. But my hope for you is that you can imagine at least a piece of this, enough to see a possibility. But the fact is that this is not my dream to dream alone. This is our dream to dream together, and it is yours to decide. The magic of this community is that you have already made so many dreams come true. A church that is welcoming, a space for all people to be. But you have also inspired me and others to dream bigger and bigger than they ever thought possible. I thank God every day that I am part of the magic that is All Souls. Thank you for inviting me to come along on this journey. Amen.